What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Nick 4K video. Today we're checking out a video from Eisenhart Productions, and his video is about Jumper, the franchise that never was. So for those of you who may not know, after Hayden Christensen was Anakin Skywalker, he played in the movie Jumper. And it was kind of like this superhero-esque movie, but also not. And there was a span of time between 2005 to 2010 before the MCU, obviously that just took over then. But before the MCU, there was a span of time where a bunch of random movies would just kind of come out that had like superheroes in them. You had Hancock, you had a movie called Push, ironically with Chris Evans, Captain America, and then you had Jumper. And of course there were other ones, but those are kind of the main three that come to my brain when I think about it. And I remember seeing Jumper in the theaters, mostly because Anakin was in it, so I had to go watch it, you know what I mean? But I remember thinking it was all right. And then I rewatched it about like a year or two ago, and I really liked it, and I was surprised it never got a sequel. So he's going to be tackling that in this video. But with all that said, if you find that you would enjoy this video, I'll have a playlist at the end of this video. You can click on it and check out my other videos too. With that said, let's begin.
Do you remember Jumper? It's the 2008 sci-fi action film starring Hayden Christensen, who plays a young man capable of teleporting, who is being hunted by a secret society intent on killing him. It's okay if you don't remember the film. It seems to be pretty forgotten in the modern age. In a lot of people's minds, it blends in with similar films like I Am Number 4 and Push, which makes sense, as these are all films focused on protagonists with superhuman abilities that had a lot of potential to be great, but all fell short of leaving a lasting impact. They also all failed to deliver on the film franchises that were teased or promised to us. So in this video, I want to examine Jumper to understand why it never got a sequel and how it wasted so much potential to be great. In 2005, Doug Liman was hired to direct a film adaptation of the Stephen Gould novel Jumper for New Regency Productions. At the time, Liman was probably most well known for directing The Bourne Identity and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, although years later he would also direct Edge of Tomorrow. The Dark Knight screenwriter, David S. Goyer, had written the first draft of the screenplay. However, Fight Club screenwriter Jim Eulers was brought in for rewrites. Later on, Simon Kinberg was brought in for a final rewrite of the script, who was the writer behind several X-Men films and also the creator of Star Wars Rebels. I just want to take a second to acknowledge the level of talent that worked on this film. It's crazy how the end result ended up being so mid. From the beginning, the intention was for Jumper to launch a film franchise, as before filming even started, the studio announced that they were going to develop a film trilogy based on the book series. In 2006, Tom Sturridge was cast as the main character, David Rice, and Teresa Palmer was cast as his love interest, Millie Harris. Samuel L. Jackson was also added to the cast as the main antagonist. Principal photography was scheduled to take place, however, it was put on hold when the decision was made by the filmmakers to age up the character from 18 to 25, so that it wouldn't be categorized as a kid's movie. This meant the studio began searching for new actors to fill in these lead roles.
If I actually could have cast somebody who could teleport, I would have done that and not had any visual effects.
Initially, Eminem was in talks to replace Sturridge, and even met with Liman to talk about the possibility of him starring in the film. However, around the same time, Liman also met Hayden Christensen, and he knew he had to go with the Skywalker. He said this in an interview with Today. At that point, I had already met Hayden and fallen in love with Hayden. It was one of those things where the studio, with all things being equal, would rather put a bigger name in the movie, and wanted Eminem. At some point, I just put my foot down and I said, I love Hayden.
I think we all love
replaced
Hayden.
Sturridge
Let's be
just
honest
2
here.
weeks before filming began, and soon after, Palmer was also replaced by Rachel Bilson. Principal photography officially kicked off in October of 2006, shooting all over the world in 14 different countries and 20 different cities, such as Toronto, Tokyo, New York, and Rome. While shooting in Rome, they got rare access to film in the Colosseum. However, as part of the negotiation with the Rome Film Commission, the crew was required to keep their equipment off the ground by using harnesses and use natural lighting for the scenes. Additionally, they could only film for about 45 minutes in the morning and at night, so they did not disturb the public touring of the amphitheater during the day. They also recreated some of the parts of the Colosseum in the studio for the shots they couldn't do at the real location. However, while shooting, they also ran into a few problems. On January 26, while shooting in Toronto, set dresser David Ritchie tragically lost his life when he was struck by frozen debris while dismantling a set. Additionally, one other worker was sent to the hospital with serious injuries. While shooting in the streets of Tokyo, Hayden Christensen suffered several injuries of his own, such as developing a hyperdilated pupil, splitting open his ear, and injuring his hand. Despite all the troubles, the film wrapped in early 2007, and Jumper went off to post-production. By the end of production, the budget was estimated to be about $85 million. With the release of the film, we also got some supplementary media to go with it. A graphic novel was released titled Jumper Jump Scars, which told several backstories from characters in the movie. Additionally, original author Stephen Gould wrote a novel tie-in called Jumper, Griffin's Story, which was centered around the character of Griffin, played by Jamie Bell, who was a new character invented for the film.
That's cool.
We also got a video game by the same name, which was released on Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, and the Wii. But from everything I saw online, the video game looked pretty ass. Jumper debuted at number 1 in the box office on February 14th of 2008. For an opening weekend gross of 20.
The thing is, a lot of movies try to do that type of thing where it's like, hey, let's do another character's story. Now, of course, that's a video game, so the quality of a movie video game, you never know. It can be amazing, like Lord of the Rings games, or it can be awful, like what we just saw. But what a lot of movies like to do is that if they can't get the main protagonist to be the main character of the next film or something along those lines, like a TV show does this too, they'll get like the Han Solo character to play the main character. And the Han Solo character, like Griffin, it doesn't work as the main character. I honestly can't think of a single time where they took the Han Solo character and it worked. I mean, maybe technically you could say the Pirates of the Caribbean, because in a certain perspective, Johnny Depp, Captain Jack, he is kind of the Han Solo of the first movie, right? But I think he did a good enough job kind of establishing himself as a pillar of the three, where he's allowed to get away with being more of the main character in 2 through 5, especially in 4 and 5. Most of the time, the Han Solo character, the cunning hero, they call him, he is not the best when you put them in the protagonist role. He's better at being the secondary protagonist or being kind of like an anti-hero to the main hero. But, you know, that's just the way it is.
$27 million. In the US, it made $80 million, and overseas, it made $144 million, for a total worldwide gross of $225
That's pretty good.
million. Although the film made money, it received some pretty negative reviews. It currently has a 15% critic and a 44% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, with a lot of the criticism pointed at the rushed narrative and underdeveloped characters. But regardless, the film made money. And at the end of the day, that's all studios really care about. So why didn't the movie get the trilogy that was originally planned? There are several books in the Jumper series which are direct sequels, those being Reflex, Impulse, and Exo. So that means there was lots of source material to work off of, and naturally, a lot of people assumed Reflex was going to be the next book to get the big screen treatment.
Honestly, for me, this is one of those movies that, like, would have been cool to see a sequel, but I also think it's a good enough standalone film. You don't need a sequel to it. So I actually am okay with it not having one, but like, there's not necessarily a massive cliffhanger at the end of this movie, if I remember correctly. Maybe there is, but I feel like it ended pretty good to the point where, like, it could have a sequel, but also it doesn't necessarily need one. So that's just my perspective, of course, but, you know, it is what it is, like I always say.
As we discussed earlier, the intention of this movie was to spawn a film franchise, and producer Lucas Foster said as much in an interview during Jumper's production. The ideas got so large that they really couldn't fit into, 1 or 2 movies. They needed to evolve over at least 3 movies. So we planned the story out over 3 movies, and then we sliced it up in such a way as to leave room for the other 2 movies. Following this film's box office success, Doug Liman discussed some of his ideas for a sequel in an interview. These include Jumpers being able to jump to other planets, jump through time, and even some characters learning how to jump, just like how Millie learns to jump in the book Reflex. 2 years later, in 2010, Hayden Christensen said in an interview with MTV that Jumper 2 was in the works. He didn't reveal when it might come out or if any other actors were returning. He just said this about the direction they were planning on going. Somewhere a little darker. I think there's a lot you can do with it. It was sort of set up in a way that it's going to be mother hunting son and possibly even maybe sister hunting brother. We're talking about it, trying to figure it out. However, after this interview, we had no more news about a Jumper sequel. That was until 2016, when YouTube commissioned a television pilot of the 3rd book in the Jumper series, Impulse. We never got a feature film sequel to Jumper, but we did get a spin-off TV series on YouTube Premium. Just like the 2008 movie, it was a very, very loose adaptation of the book it was based on. Lyman did serve as a producer of the series, and even directed the pilot episode. The series ran for 2 seasons until it was canceled in 2020. Lyman stated he decided to focus on the TV series instead of a proper Jumper sequel because he wanted to do what he wasn't able to do in the film. While making Jumper, Lyman's creative decisions were restricted by the studio, and he saw Impulse as an opportunity to address the concept of the book series the way he always wanted to. But I think there's a few more reasons why Jumper never got that film sequel. The reality is, they built the film franchise on a rotten foundation. So in order to correct it, they would need to do too much damage control in the second film in order to get the franchise back on the right track. Although the first film was a financial success, its reviews from casual audiences and fans was pretty negative, which means it's likely a second film wouldn't be as big of a financial success. Although it's hard to believe now since a large majority of people have come around and now love the Star Wars prequels, at the time Hayden Christensen was pretty disliked.
True.
After the prequels, a lot of people were using any chance they got to dunk on him, since he
I
got
always
a lot of
liked
flack
him.
for his performances in those movies.
I always loved Hayden.
In 2010, he wasn't a very bankable movie star, which may also contribute to the studio's reluctance to go ahead with a second film. Lastly, Doug Liman just became preoccupied with other projects he was more inspired to work on. During the time Impulse was released, Liman admitted in an interview with Rotten Tomatoes that he held some regrets surrounding Jumper. It's no secret that, of all my films, Jumper's the one I harbor some creative regrets. Feel like I could have done better. That's something that's hung over me. These regrets over Jumper likely contributed to Lyman's reluctance to make a sequel to the film. But what exactly is so bad about Jumper? Well, I'd like to give some of my thoughts on why the film is lacking and where some of the weak spots are. To me, Jumper could be best characterized as a film that could have been great, but is only okay. I don't hate the film as much as other people. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and would probably rate it a 3 out of 5. I was pretty shocked to see how bad the reviews online were, but after reading some of the criticisms, I totally get it. But 15%? Come on, Rotten Tomatoes, that's a little overkill.
Yeah,
Although
no.
I enjoy the movie, there are so
it's
many
better
changes
than that.
the filmmakers could have made, which could have made this an amazing film. First off, this film has a lot of differences from the book. Pretty much the entire plot is different, which I know angered a lot of fans of the original novel. But we're not here to talk about the differences between page and screen. We're here to talk about why the film is underwhelming. However, I still want to recognize that changing a lot of the material from the book is what resulted in a lot of the problems that we're going to analyze. One of the big changes they could have made to the film was tightening up the narrative. This is one of those instances where the movie's plot is both rushed and meandering at the same time. The first hour takes its time setting up the world and the characters, and then the last 30 minutes blow by way too quickly. I rarely say this, but this is a film that could have been longer. The jump from the second act to the third act happened too fast, as we could have used an extra 10 to 15 minutes in that area to bridge the gap.
That's a fair argument.
We could have cut down some of the time that was dedicated to the romance subplot, as overall, that was one of the weakest aspects of the movie. You can also feel this rush plot in a lot of the characters' decisions. Like Griffin and David battling against each other at the end felt really rushed and like they were making up excuses just so that we could see two jumpers fight each other. And then there's the issue of unresolved plot points and characters. Over the film, David goes from hating his dad to saving his life. However, after the scene where he jumps his dad to the hospital, there's no more resolution between the two characters. We never find out what happens to David's dad afterwards, and they don't get a chance to talk face-to-face again, which I think was a huge missed opportunity. Additionally, after Griffin gets caught up in the power lines, we don't get any more scenes with him or even a clue to what might have happened to him. He is one of the main characters in the movie, and we don't even get to see what happens to him after he gets caught up in the power lines. I get that they may have been leaving this open to explore in a potential sequel, but we could have at least got a proper end to his story in this movie, instead of just banking on the next movie to wrap it up. The filmmakers really should have tied up these loose ends, but they were left wide open and hinder this movie from feeling fully realized. The whole climax of the film was pretty underwhelming, even though I did like a lot of the action. It was pretty damn cool. But I thought David's character arc was kind of lacking. Yes, he completed the arc of not running from his problems, but there was the whole aspect of him using his powers for good that was never really completed. Like in the beginning of the film, we get a scene of him watching TV, of people stranded and needing help during a flood. But he chooses not to help. And then there's the dialogue Roland had about how jumpers always turn evil and are only self-serving. I totally thought this was planting the seeds that he was going to use his powers for good rather than selfish reasons. But the only good he uses his powers for is for saving his girlfriend. I just wanted a little more from that arc. The jumpers in this movie also run into what I like to call the Flash problem. This is when a character has an ability that is so overpowered that the writers have to bend over backwards in order to manufacture conflict. You see this happen all the time when people write for the Flash, or really any superhero or villain with crazy powers. And you see it on full display in this movie with the jumpers. The writers always have to force the characters to make stupid decisions or come up with BS reasons why they can't solve a problem right away. The last thing that I wanted to comment on that was a huge missed opportunity in this film was the main antagonist, Roland. Not only because they wasted the talents of Samuel L. Jackson, but because his character could have been so much more intriguing. If we got some more character development with him and the Paladins where we could understand more of their philosophy, it would have improved this film so much. Just like everything else in the movie, the concept was there, but the execution was off. And I didn't even talk about David's relationship with his mother in this film, which was a whole nother issue that I'm sure book fans were really pissed off about. After the poor response from the first movie and the creatives behind the scenes reluctance to return to this product on the big screen, the sequel to Jumper slowly faded away. Although we did get a spin-off on YouTube Premium and a horrible video game, we may never get to see what a proper sequel would look like. Jumper falls into the same category that 2011's In Time does. It's a movie that has a really great concept, but a mediocre execution. And it just sucks, because this movie had a super talented crew of writers, and the source material is well regarded, and the director has made great movies before, but in the end, the finished product was still so underwhelming. But hey, what are your thoughts on the film? Did you like Jumper? Did you hate it? Or did you just think it was okay? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This has been Tom from Eisenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. See you next week.
All right, so let's talk about it. Let's see a Jumper 2. Hayden Christensen, he's back. Everyone loves him now. Let's see it. Let's do it. Let's do a second one. Maybe he can be a mentor to a new Jumper, and there's new Paladins running around being bad guys. I want to see it. I think there's more story to tell here. Maybe we could even do something along the lines of de-aging technology. We've seen it work really well with him in the Obi-Wan show. He looks great. And the Clone Wars shot especially, he looks like young Anakin, so that'd be great to see. So maybe we can do that, do some flashbacks, maybe show that between these two movies he did become a hero and then something happened and he left, and then he's coming back into the fold to help the new protagonist. But what do you guys think? Did you want to see a sequel for Jumper, or do you think it was just like okay movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoy this video and want to see more like this, make sure to click the links that are around my head over here. I have plenty of other videos you can check out. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. Peace.